This podcast is brought to you by Nuveen and Ruffer. Nuveen has provided investment excellence for 125 years. With expertise across income and alternatives, Nuveen continues to expand its capabilities while maintaining its legacy as a leading investment manager. Visit nuveen.com to learn more. Investing involves risk, loss of principal is possible. Ruffer is a London-based asset manager founded in 1994, managing over $25 billion for institutions, pension funds, charities, and individuals. They have a single investment approach that aims to deliver positive returns across the full range of market conditions. Investing involves risk, loss of principal is possible. Our next guest dropped out of high school, joined the police force, and after 30 years transitioned to a role protecting their pensions. Hear from him about the evolving landscape of public pensions, what's on the mind of the beneficiaries as well as the officers, and why so much of life is about persevering, having empathy, and refusing to be a victim. I'm Aoife Devitt, and welcome to the 50 Faces podcast, a podcast committed to revealing the richness and diversity of the world of investment by focusing on its people and their stories. I'm joined today by Jim McNamee, who is president of the National Public Pension Fund Association. He's also director of Stonegate Insurance, Unique Insurance Company, and Resolute Global Partners, as well as the founder of the Illinois Public Pension Fund Association, which he founded in 1985. He was formerly a police officer. Welcome, Jim. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, you've had a long and fascinating career, and we've spoken a little bit about your background in those pre-IPPFA days. But can you just take us back a little bit to where you grew up and how you came to join the police?
Well, sure. I actually grew up in what was one time a very small town called Schaumburg, and it was basically a farm town when we moved out there in 1960. The town's population was maybe 4,000 people, and it was mainly farms. We didn't even have our own post office. Everything back then was Roselle Post Office, Roselle Fire Department. Schaumburg was just a rural farm community, just starting out.
The McNamee is clearly an Irish connotation. What about your parents? When did they come to Chicago? What about the family heritage a little bit?
Well, we're Irish Catholics. So basically, my mom grew up in Oak Park. My dad grew up in Cicero. And then I lived only in Cicero until I was about 3. Then they were able to get a small house out in Schaumburg. At that time, a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house for their growing family, which was great because my dad was a milkman. So, I am the son of the milkman, so I can laugh about that. But it was a good jump for them to get out there and to get some space and to actually have your own house. And I think they only paid that house back in 1960. What was it, about $12,000? So, you think about that in today's dollars and everything. Everything's so changed. And it was a neighborhood of children. Lots of kids. Everybody had pretty decent sized families back then. And I'm from a family of 7 brothers and sisters. And that was about the average size within our clan. We had some that had 11 kids and so on and so forth. So there were some big families amongst our group and stuff. But it was fun in gatherings because there was a lot of first cousins. So it was we were like a big organization when we got together. We'd take over our neighborhood.
I can imagine there was some great fun in those days. And then your schooling. So we actually chatted about this for a while. So maybe there was the School of Tough Love in the Chicago Catholic schools at the time, or Schaumburg Catholic schools. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, it's kind of funny when I look back on it. We even have our own website, I Survived, such and such. I won't name the school. It was a tough love situation, as you would call it, but it was corporal punishment. You had to toughen yourself up. Imagine, I was a terrible speller, and they loved to. Jim, what was your test score in front of the whole class? You had to answer. And I'd say 30%. And they say, what was that again? 30%, and they'd do, oh, okay. And they'd make sure everybody in the class couldn't spell worth a damn. And they always did that. And then they like to hit you with the yardstick or the pointer. But the nuns weren't even as physical as the lay male teachers. The lay male teachers were very physical. And they would sometimes really beat the tar out of you. So you had to toughen up to be able to deal with that, and I think, it's interesting because some of us who were kind of focused on by some of the teachers for some extracurricular punishment got into law enforcement. It was interesting that we did that. It was interesting that it pushed us in that direction, that, we were subject to some special attention that nowadays they'd go to jail for, but back then, they got away with it. Part of it was because it was a Catholic school. Families didn't question the church. So you didn't do that. It was just quiet, hush up, and take your lumps.
It's just remarkable how much things have changed, though, in just a few decades. I mean, even my decade, I don't think would have encountered that. And it just, I suppose now we have other issues, which you probably saw in the police department in terms of some of perhaps the lack of discipline. But then again, there's always going to be some repercussion from it, no matter what way discipline is enforced. So tell us then, so you joined the police department, how much of that was directly related to your school experience, or did you always have a desire to go into law enforcement? Had you watched some cops and robbers show on TV that you decided that's me?
You know what? Well, two things. One, me and another gentleman, Jay Rehak, with several other people, co-authored a book about our experiences. It was called Somebody Else's Shoes. And it's about empathy. So we wrote this book out there. But getting into law enforcement was something that when I got into the military, and I'm a high school dropout. I'm not embarrassed of that. I just was not a good student, one of those functional good students. I just couldn't seem to concentrate. I was one of those guys. The nuns used to call me a daydreamer. Jim's a daydreamer. Jim can't concentrate. And I'd get bored quickly in class. And it was just how I was and, how I was wired. When I got into the military, it really helped me get focused. And then I got my high school diploma when I was in the military. So I spent my senior year of high school active duty in the military and then went overseas to Germany. So I'm probably I was the first volunteer in the volunteer army when they first switched over. So they were still draftees when I was in. Very interesting time going through that in 1974. And it was a good experience for me because it opened doors for me and told me, one, I wasn't stupid. I was always being told I was stupid. I wasn't stupid. It taught me that I could count on myself a lot of, what I needed to count on. And when I was in there, that was where I really started to focus on thinking, well, you know what, I'd like to get out and become a policeman. Now, I didn't do that right away. I actually went to work for the Archdiocese of Chicago for a little while at a place called Maryville Academy, which was where they put wards of the state, orphanage, wards of the state, whatever. And so I was one of the counselors there, is what they called us, to deal with boys ages 13 through 17. And I was, the guy that would try to keep them in line, the surrogate father, so to speak. That was a great experience because I wanted to be a policeman, but getting from there to understanding troubled kids before I became a policeman was really good. I mean, it really helps you, give you a foundation.
And so you became a police officer, and that was, 40-year career, a long career there. Can you tell us a little bit about where you did this? Was it in the same precinct the whole time?
No. I did 29 years as a policeman. And then I had a cousin who was on the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. So at the time, he was like the head of narcotics out there. But he was always after me to, because I was a Barrington policeman. He goes, you want to be a real cop, you got to come out to LA and, that whole macho thing. And I'm like, well, I don't know, all right. So I went out there. I tried it out. I was there for a year and got through all their training, got through all their stuff. And then I said, you know what, this really isn't for me out here. I don't want to stay out west. I'm a Midwestern boy. So I came back and I was on a leave of absence from Barrington. So I was able to get reinstated. And they actually gave me a leave of absence from LA County because they felt they had, as they told me, they said, we spent so much money training you. We don't want to lose you. We want you to come back. And of course, I never did. But it was a good experience. It taught me a lot. Every experience, you just pack it in as much as you can because you learn from it. And I learned from out there. That was a great experience and about people and things out there. So that was kind of fun. And then I came back here.
I'd love to know what doing that work with the boys kind of on the brink, on the edge of society, maybe needing intervention, as well as on the police side, how did that frame your professional persona later? Now that you've moved into investing and working with pension funds, what do you think it taught you in terms of empathy, patience, maybe dealing with difficult personalities? What skill set did those close to 30 years endow upon you?
I'm always looking to be a fixer, right? That was me. I want to fix something. If I can fix it, how can I do that? What sort of resources are out there? And how can I train people? Because I like to do that. That was always my gig. And of course, I'm an American Irishman, but I could talk. That was my gift of gab. I've been, as I always said, you have the gift of gab, so to speak. And I have that gift. I use that a lot to reach people. Because the one thing I learned, especially with damaged kids, was you learn really quickly how to read them. You learn really quickly looking at their body language, what's going on, where are they at, and then how to try to get into what's going on with them. And that's the same with law enforcement. You got to read people. You got to learn how to read them because body language is so important, but also what's going on inside them. And hopefully you can come up and be helpful to them And of course, if you have to be tough, you're tough. You have to know when there's a threat. So those all things, come into play. Helping those kids was fun. There were some kids, you knew were going to make it. And then you knew some that you just knew they weren't going to make it no matter what you did for them, because the damage was so great that they had, and they didn't have then, once they're out at 18, there was no resources for them back then.
And just, that level of empathy and that, recognition of how broken and damaged, I suppose, some members of society can be. Did that make you a more empathetic police officer later? Because I think, the police officers do get sometimes a bad rap for not seeing that whole picture. How did you approach repeat offenders, I suppose, and the psychology of that?
Right. You can't be warm and gushy with everybody. That just doesn't work. You have to be able to read them right away. And if somebody's a bad news tough, you got to be as bad news and as tough as you need to be with that type of person, because they're going to look at you as weak. They're going to look at you as soft, and they're going to try to take advantage of that situation. But there's other people you have to be able to read right away where you can tell there's something else going on, and then you deal with them that way. And all that helps. I was very young in my department and got hired at age 21. And then I became our local union president like age 23. 2 years on, the old timers liked me and they elected me the head of our police association. And that's what kind of pushed me into with the pension funds and everything else. Because I learned early on when I first got on the department with the head of our police association, we didn't have collective bargaining. We used to call it collective begging. You didn't have collective bargaining. So all you could do was beg the management for a pay raise. And you had to learn tactics really quick. You had to learn how to press buttons to get what you needed to get done. What levers of power do you have? And one of the levers of power I discovered is that we have is we controlled our pension fund, but we didn't know it. And there was no resources for it. You get elected to the board, here you go. And the city basically managed it. And we were basically mushrooms, kept in the dark and fed a lot of nonsense. Well, that isn't what I wanted to see happen. I realized right away that we had this money that we should be knowing and being good stewards of and utilizing for the benefit of the police officers. So that was one of the things I really pushed hard. So when I first started, the organization was called the Illinois Police Pension Fund Association. And one of the things I did, which I was so proud of myself, is, I know I'm dating myself, but this is the 80s. So in the 80s, mortgage rates were like at 16%. And I used our pension fund to come up with the Barrington Police Home Mortgage Loan Plan. And the state sued me, the city sued me, everybody was after me. And I won. Went up through the courts, I won. They said that what we were doing was legal and we weren't violating any fiduciary responsibility. And then the International Foundation Employee Benefit Plans gave me an award for that. And then some union plans copied us. And the exact same thing happened to them, where the Department of Labor went after them, sued them, and they won also. Same thing, because they copied what we did. And we never put our pension funds at risk. No assets were at risk. We weren't lending out assets. And I don't want to get too deep into it, but we gave our guys mortgage rates when mortgage rates was 16% at 8%. So imagine, saving $500 a month. That's a big deal. It's like a pay raise, a huge pay raise. And we did that. And the idea came to me when the village went to hire their police chief. He said, well, he wasn't going to come unless, the village gave him a mortgage. And I said, well, that's a great idea. Why don't we do that for everybody, though, not just for the top guy? That's where I came up with that whole concept. And then we put forward the mortgage plan, and that was fun. And I was so young back then, fighting the state and having all these people come after me was exciting. I enjoyed it. It was like a battle, especially when we won. I was very excited by that.
Those battles are the formative ones that sort of set the stage for the ones that come after. Now going to setting up the IPPFA initially and now the NPPFA. What led you to found that beyond this initial kind of work with the pension? And what is your goal for both organizations in terms of the kind of conversations and movements that you're trying to start?
Well, with IPPFA, the first thing I wanted to do was to have a resource, because, every other government agency has an association, a training organization that represents their interests and assists them. That was my first goal. I realized that I needed to have that out there, that we're trained as police officers, or we're trained as firefighters, or we're trained in our other occupations, and we have all sorts of resources, but we're not trained in this specific area. And it's so important for us to know what's going on with our money, how we invest in our money, and also to understand on disabilities and all the other aspects of it. So the one thing I love is I love putting together things. This was fun for me, and then getting speakers together. And then the second thing I learned really fast was half your learning is networking, is meeting other people who've already dealt with the problem. And then they dealt with the problem that you're facing, and they can tell you about it. And you just learn something from that. But if you don't put a conference together, you don't put these events together, they don't have the time to network and meet with each other. So that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that. And I started with the state. And then later on, I began talking to all these other state pension associations, realizing we're all facing different issues in our state. And I thought, well, this would be fun to put a national roundtable. There's a lot of national groups, but I wanted to put one together that was more focused, not on the vendors, because a lot of them it's focused on the vendors. And, in all respect, it does. It was focused more on the people attending and networking and talking to one another and building their relationships, because that was, to me, was very important to give them that experience. And, nothing happens in a vacuum anymore. I mean, when you look at, just like when with NPPFA, we can't be parochial here. So we have to have, our viewpoints have to be more worldly in how we look at things. Americans, when we are parochial, we like to think we're in this bubble. But we're not. Everything's interconnected. We really need to be talking to one another. And you'll find, as I found out, if I go to United Kingdom, they're dealing with all the same stuff we're dealing with. They may call it something different. We do speak the same language, but it's a little different in how we pronounce things. And or you go to Ireland, same thing. Or you go to Europe, same thing. It's all the same thing. And the most important thing that we are dealing with is people's retirement. And this is the one thing I try to beat the drum home, is making sure people have good retirements, because their pension is their most valuable asset. People used to think it was their home, but it's really their pension. That's the most valuable asset they have. And then we need to make sure we have people good retirement outcomes. So I kind of enjoy this whole thing. It's fun to put it together. It's fun to bring people together, and then it's fun to see how it all works and see everybody come together, because it's like being a chef. If you got the right ingredients and it tastes good, everybody's thrilled, right? That's the way I look at it. It's just a lot of fun to put these things together.
And now we bring you a message from one of our sponsors of this series, Nuveen. Nuveen has provided investment excellence for 125 years. A lot has changed, but one thing remains constant. Including different types of durable income in portfolios can help investors meet their goals. With expertise across income and alternatives, Nuveen continues to expand its capabilities while maintaining its legacy as a leading investment manager. Visit nuveen.com to learn more. Investing involves risk, loss of principal as possible. And now, back to the show. But what's on the menu then? So right now, we put it together, it tastes good, but there's going to be something different on the menu from year to year. What do you see as being kind of at the forefront of these pension funds' minds? And you've gone really to every nook and cranny in terms of, you've looked at ESG years before other pension funds were looking at, other conferences were looking at it. You've had some broad involvement of securities litigation firms. You've looked at private credit, every asset class. What's on the pension funds' minds today?
Well, it's geopolitical risk. If you look, so the world's at this point where we've got these elections all over the world, right? From India, United States, the United Kingdom, everywhere. All these elections, all these things that are going on. So there's going to be a lot of geopolitical risk that's happening. Obviously, the wars are affecting us. As investors, we need to be aware of that risk. We need to be aware of what's going on, because it'll disrupt how our investments go if we're not aware of it. And just understanding each other and talking to each other. If you go to Europe, they're very big on ESG, much more so ahead of us than we are in the United States. And I always tell everybody, I have no problem with ESG. I said, ESG can be there, whatever you want it to be. If you're worried about the environment, you push very hard on these issues. The only danger I see is politicians doing overreach, getting involved in our area of investing through overreach. Now, that always concerns me, whether it's on the left or the right. On the right, where they have their own point of view on how the climate change doesn't exist. And on the left, where you have to set fixed dates to decarbon things. And is the energy network and grid up to speed for that? Are we up to speed for that? Or are we setting these artificial dates by politicians who really don't understand how everything's interconnected? And so for me, and this is just a personal point of view, I don't believe in divesting as much as I believe in engagement. Because if you divest, you don't have a seat at the table. If you stay engaged, you have a seat at the table. You should be part of. You should be talking. And the United States needs to do a much better job. You'll see some, like in Scotland, they really push ESG. I give them credit. Going out of my hotel room when I was there visiting on a trip on vacation here, the hotel room lights are off down the hallway until you walk into the hallway. There are no plastic bottles. It's glass. They do more old school stuff that we used to do, but we went to all this plastic. So we got all this petrochemicals in our society. Not good, really not good. It's convenient. We're lazy with it now. How do we get rid of this? The plastic bags, all that other stuff. We really need to do a better job. And I think we should be better caretakers. Nobody wants garbage. right? We don't want to leave garbage for our kids. So we need to be better caretakers on everything, but we need to be engaged, and we need to make sure when we are engaged that we're listening, that we're not coming in and because when people come in and they just, well, this is how it is. This is a fixed date. This is what we're doing over here. Then people are talking past each other, and that drives me crazy.
And you obviously, from your years of service, are a beneficiary too. Putting your beneficiary hat on around these public plans, what do beneficiaries worry about? I mean, maybe the pension fund investment team worry about the geopolitical risk, but do you think that the police officers know they're going to get their pension at the end of the day? Are they worried about low funding levels? Are they worried about ESG? What's on their mind when they think about, their pension?
They worry about low funded levels. They want to make sure their pension is there for them, because for most of them, they don't have that full Social Security coverage because we have the government pension offset for most of us. So the pension is their main source of retirement. So that's a big issue. They want to make sure. And again, going back many years ago, I sued the state of Illinois when they went to the ramp, because I said the ramp would become a problem, which it did. I was right. I said, you can't be backloading all your payments, which is what they did. That was irresponsible and reckless. And it poured more money onto future generations to have to pay. We're paying down on it now, and that's important because we are paying down on it. The state's doing its job. Most cities are doing their job. But everybody worries, they want to make sure that their pension's going to be there for them when they retire. That's their main concern. Is my pension going to be there for me when I retire? And then obviously they worry about medical insurance, because police and firemen in our state, they're on their own. So they have to pay their own medical insurance when they retire. So in between those gap years between Medicare and, when they retire, they have to pay their own medical insurance. They're on the hook for that. That's a big hit for them. And that's another issue that we're working on. We want to make sure we can take care of them as much as we can for that issue. So, this is an ever evolving area of pensions and what we can do to improve it and what we can do that works well for society, but also for the occupation. And so we're pushing things forward right now to try to improve things.
Moving to some reflections now. So you've had a long career in both areas, both law enforcement and investing now. Who would be some of the key people maybe who really made an impression on you and maybe put you on this path or influenced your path?
Well, the first person was a guy named Gene Wolfe. Gene was the one who pushed me to form the association. And he was a retired policeman from Wheeling. And that was a long time ago. So Gene was my first person along that way. There's been so many people, obviously my mom and dad, thank God. The one thing I learned was perseverance, right? And hard work, especially from my dad, who was like work 6 days a week as a milkman, getting up at 3:30 in the morning and not coming home until 6 o'clock at night. So it was all of, teaching you all that was important going forward. And there were so many different people because everybody gives you a helping hand along the way, and you never realize how important that is. And thank God for all these people who were involved in my life, because there were so many people that helped me and steer me in the right direction or gave me some assistance or believed in me. That was impressive that people would actually believe in what I was trying to do or believed in me enough that they would help me and assist me. And there was Dick Pachowski and his father, Benny Pachowski. My God, they were fantastic. Benny was the head of the Ironworkers Union, and his son, Dick, was my first real attorney and put together the first pension trustee handbook for our public pension trustees. So, and he did it because I talked him into it. So thank you, Dick. God bless you. These people were fantastic. You never realize it until you start to realize it, because, nobody carries anything by themselves. It's a group effort.
Oh, that's wonderful. And again, I'm sure these long years in dealing with people have given you a creed or motto that you live by yourself, or words of wisdom that you'd like to share. Can you share some of those with us?
Oh my gosh. You know what? My biggest words of wisdom is perseverance. Be adaptable and persevere, and don't be a victim. If bad things happen to you, bad things happen to a lot of people, and it'll put you on a path. And either you can allow yourself to go down that path and get ahead, or you can stay absorbed in your victimhood and not get ahead. And that's the worst thing you can do, is just stay absorbed in victimhood. Get ahead, persevere, and help people as you go, because we're all part of this. Everybody's part of something. And I think that's the best way to go. I mean, some of your most perseverant people you'll ever meet are police and firemen. They persevere. I mean, they see some of the most horrific things, and they have to box it up and put it away. And it's amazing what they do. And I think you look at that and you say, my God, that's what's important to me. Can I give something? Can I do something? And will I persevere? Because in the end, he was the old Catholic boy. I mean, in the end, we're all judged by what we've done, right? And I would like to think that I've left the world a little bit better than when I came into it. At least I'd like to think that.
Those are wonderful words. And I think what also comes from persevering is taking control. And I think that we all know this in today's workplace, that it's not just what you get paid that counts. It's the amount of control you have, whether of your own schedule, of the work you do, of your path in life. And I think emerging from trauma and deciding not to let it define you is one of the most important ways you can take control. And I don't think everybody has the strength to do it. But watching people like you, people like the other police officers, and also finding that this is the way, in fact, to advise others, I think that's very powerful. So thank you so much, Jim. You said you were a surrogate father all those years ago. I see you as being a bit of a surrogate father in our industry too. You wrap your arms around not only a disparate group of public pension plans, you bring us together, you make us find our people and find the camaraderie there that is probably a bit like working in a police precinct. I feel that we bond at these events. You do so much for the industry. You're everywhere you can be, and you're always reaching for the next topic. No topic is too complex or too fringe for you to tackle at one of these meetings. So thank you for your endless curiosity. Thank you that you have persevered. And thank you for coming here and sharing your insights with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And it's been a pleasure getting to know you all these years. And I got to say, I love all your podcasting. I follow it all. To me, it's like you got to stay informed. So I'm always trying to keep up with everything. So thank you so much, Ethan.
Well, from Jim McNamee to Jim Maloney, all of my contact with anyone in the IPPFA has been nothing but a pleasure. So thank you. I'm Ethan Devitt. Thank you for listening to the 50 Faces podcast. If you liked what you heard and would like to tune in to hear from more inspiring investors and their personal journeys, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as investment advice, and all views are personal and should not be attributed to the organizations and affiliations of the host or any guest.